Good afternoon or good evening. Welcome to this webinar as part of the AdWiseOnline campaign. My name is Gareth Court. I am part of the digital citizenship team here at European Schoolnet. We are the ones behind the AdWiseOnline campaign, which is part of the Better Internet for Kids programme on behalf of the European Commission. So delighted to have you as part of this webinar this evening to talk about how you can protect your learners from manipulative digital marketing in online games. And of course, further afield as well, as we'll see, many of the techniques that are used to encourage learners and young people to share data and to spend money are used in many other places online, not just in online games. But this webinar will be putting a bit more of a focus on online games. Please do be aware that we are recording this webinar for the benefit of those who can't join us live. Your cameras and your microphones are switched off, but you are free to use the chat, and you can see my colleague Ina has already put a welcome message in there. We will be dropping in some useful links along the way to resources that are showcased in this webinar, but please do feel free to leave any comments or ask any questions in the chat. I've got a two-screen setup going on today, so I should be able to see them as and when they come in. So please do feel free to get involved and interact as well. So we're going to dive straight into the webinar. There's a lot to cover in here, including a couple of interactive activities that we'd really love you to take part in if you can as well. In this webinar, we're going to have a look at the main persuasive marketing tactics that are used in online games and just put your knowledge of some of those to the test. And then we're going to take that a bit further in terms of understanding some of the main themes of these tactics and the ways in which they work and how they can sometimes be very difficult for your learners to be able to identify when they come across them in the games they love to play. We're going to consider the impact of these tactics on well-being and physical health and mental health and safety and privacy, but also, really importantly, on the rights of young people online, both consumer rights and their more fundamental rights as a child. We're going to think about how we can respond as educators to that with media literacy and advertising literacy resources, and I'll showcase some really useful things that you may wish to go away and use after this session. And really importantly, we'll make sure we cover where you can get further help and support as well. Before we dive into all of that, though, you may already be aware, but the Better Internet for Kids platform now has a new home. The new address is there on the screen, so please do update any bookmarks if you haven't already. It still contains many of the resources that you could find on the old platform, but it now has advanced search features, and it's much easier to navigate, and of course, new functionality and new things added all the time. One of those things includes the Learning Corner for teachers and educators, which you may have come across before on the old platform. There are core learning modules that you can work through that are completely self-directed to help you understand the fundamentals of child online safety and digital citizenship. And then you can see from the screenshot at the bottom with lots of green icons there, we are regularly adding new deep dive modules on in-depth topics. So things such as cyberbullying, cybersecurity, deepfakes, fake news, virtual worlds and VR, artificial intelligence, algorithms, many things. So we're always adding to those, and all of that content is completely free to access. You don't need to sign in or anything, so you can find all of those in the Learning Corner. So a great way of helping you stay up to date with the most current topics and indeed the online risks that may be affecting your learners. So please do check it out if you haven't already. But we're going to turn our attention in this webinar to thinking about manipulative digital marketing tactics, particularly those in games. And a great place to start is the graphic you can see on the left. It's an old adage online, but it is still very true, is that when something online is free, you are the product. And that's very much the case with many of the free games and apps that children love to use on smartphones, tablets, computers, and consoles. If it's completely free to download and play, chances are it's trying to make money out of you as a user. That could be through trying to encourage you to share personal data in some way, or it could be trying to encourage you into making purchases of things within the game. That could be extra lives, extra outfits or characters or costumes, extra features, even sometimes paying an upfront cost to remove advertising, which is another way of generating revenue. And you'll see on the screen here just three sort of main types that these fall into of types of digital marketing tactics. And these are some types that we've explained to parents and carers recently in their webinar and also feature in some educational content for them. So it's useful for you to be aware of. But we're going to take your thinking a little bit beyond these in a moment through a quiz and through the additional slides in this webinar. But it's useful to understand that there are persuasive features in action that are trying to encourage children to share data or spend money on things. There are also what we call subscription traps, features in games where once you've got into them and you've paid an upfront cost, you enter into a monthly subscription fee where you are constantly paying that reoccurring amount to have that additional features or to remove advertising each and every month. And indeed, increasingly in many games and even further afield, there's product placement and promotion. So influencers talking about various products or various things within a game, and indeed products themselves being placed in a game and subtly advertising and marketing to children to try and encourage and influence their spending habits as well. So let's dig a little bit deeper into some of those tactics, and we're going to do that via a Menti quiz. So you can see the QR code on the screen. If you have another device to hand, like a smartphone, please do feel free to scan that code, and that will take you straight to the quiz. Otherwise, you can enter the web address that you can see on screen, www.menti.com. And then once you get on there in your browser, you'll need to enter the code that's on screen as well. And you can see that Ina has just popped into the chat all of those details. While you're doing that, I'm going to stop sharing my slides and share the Menti presentation so that we can do the quiz together, and it will sort of match the things that appear on your screen as you're doing the quiz too. So don't worry that you're going to see the Menti code and the QR code disappear off my screen now. They are there in the chat for you, and they will appear on screen with the Menti quiz once I switch screens as well. So just give me a moment, and we shall switch over to our quiz. Fabulous. So hopefully now you can see my screen, which has got the quiz. So if a colleague could just give me a thumbs up or just let me know that they can see it too, and I think we'll be good to go.
Yes, we can see it.
Fabulous. Thank you, Ina. So if you didn't catch the details, they're there in the chat, but you can see them on my screen as well up the top, and the QR code is to the left. So I'm just going to advance the slides so we can get ready to play our quiz. Please do play if you can. I'll just give people a few moments so we know how many players we've got for this game, and then we will get started. Okay, quite a cozy game today. So when I press enter to start the quiz, you will get a question that describes a particular type of persuasive design feature. And then you will have 3 options to choose from for the name of that persuasive design technique. Only one of those is the right answer. You will have 20 seconds in which to answer, and the quicker that you put your correct answer in, the more points that you score. So I will read out the question as it displays on screen and the answers, and then you should have enough time to think and ponder and select your answer. So if we're ready, off we go. Question 1. Offering discounts or rare in-game items for a limited period of time using terms like limited edition or one time only. Is that notifications? Is that FOMO, also known as fear of missing out? Or is that pay to win? Speedy people today, because you all put your answers in well before the time, so well done. And well done to 2 of you, so you got it right. So it is indeed fear of missing out. Sometimes these features may be pay to win as well. So that means actually paying for additional things that make you better than other players in the game. But the use of the language is very much a persuasive effort to get people to feel that they're going to miss out if they don't purchase something very, very quickly. And here's a quick example of that. So this is actually in an online game that I like to play that is free to play on mobile and on PC, but really does try hard to encourage players of all ages into making purchases. So you can see by the arrows on the screen here, you've got things that suggest it may be limited time or limiting how many that someone can buy. And you might notice the red writing is actually a countdown of how long you've got left to buy that before it leaves the store, possibly forever. And all of these are very subtle features designed to try and encourage people into making a purchase sooner rather than later, and making a purchase rather than not making a purchase at all and possibly missing out. Okay, let's move on to question 2. We've got an additional player. Fantastic. Okay, off we go. Question 2. Using bright colors on buttons and game features to make them stand out more or to draw your attention. Is that use of color and size? Is that a variable reward? Or is that a battle pass? Well done, everyone, for voting. Let's see if you're right. Brilliant. Everyone got that one right. You are absolutely correct. So it's using color and it's using shapes as a way of drawing attention to certain features in a game. Because if you make a button big and green or big and red, someone might be more likely to press on it than on another option. And that can very much be used into encouraging children, particularly, to share personal data by agreeing to terms and conditions or agreeing to features that may actually be collecting data about them, sometimes without them really understanding or knowing. So here's an example. This isn't a real example, just sort of a mock-up of what something might look like in an app or a game. And you can see that the button to say yes or to buy or to consent is nice and big and green. And the option to decline is very, very small. It's just written as text and it's right down in the corner. And you sometimes see that with other forms in online games where the cancel button is just an X up in the corner, and sometimes you have to wait for a timer or a countdown before you can even press that X to quit out, particularly in online adverts as well. Okay, moving on to our third one. Off we go. Selling in-game items or features that give players an advantage over other players. Is that a nudge technique? Is that pay to win? Or is that autoplay? And if you were paying attention at the start of the quiz, you might have got a hint. Well done. It is indeed pay to win. So anything that you can purchase in the game that gives you a competitive advantage over other players, power-ups, extra lives, making your character stronger or better, is known as pay to win because the people who spend more money tend to be better than the players who do not because they have all those extra advantages that they have paid for. And there's a term given to people who spend a lot of money in games to kind of use this pay to win to their advantage. They are often known as whales, as in the big aquatic animal, because they spend a lot of money. All of these that we see in this quiz are probably examples in many cases of nudge techniques as well, trying to nudge someone into making a certain decision. And through this one, it's trying to highlight the benefits of being more competitive or more successful. So here's an example from a popular online game that children do play. And for this one, actually, when you run out of energy in the game, you have to wait for it to recharge, and that can take hours and hours and hours to recharge all your energy. But if you want to skip the waiting, you can pay gems, which are part of the in-game currency that you buy with real money. So you can just press on that, pay 55 gems, and carry on playing. And that can very much encourage people to want to purchase gems in order to make sure they don't have to wait for hours on end to continue in the game. Okay, moving on to question 4. And we've got a few extra players. Fantastic. Off we go. Spending money to open a mystery pack or chest with no guarantee of what rewards you might receive or get. Is that a nudge technique? Is that notifications? Or is that loot boxes? Well done. So again, it is a form of nudge technique, but this specific one is known as loot boxes. So buying or paying real money to open a mystery chest, a pack, a box, which may have certain odds on items. So there may be a 1% chance of getting an ultra rare item, but you really don't know what you're going to open until you do actually open that chest or that box. Do you get something amazing and rare? Do you get something that you already have 100 of in the game that feels a bit worthless? And it is, in essence, and recognized by some countries as being a form of gambling, because there are gambling-like mechanics. It is a game of chance. So here's just an example from, again, another popular game with some children. And you can see also the sort of persuasive power in terms of pricing here as well. So the way the pricing scales in this is that the more money you spend, the better value for money each loot box becomes as well. And you can see that the prices start for this game down at $32, but at the top end are $320. So there really are quite large sums of money that users can be persuaded into spending for virtual in-game items. And in the case of loot boxes, not even being certain which items you're getting for $320. And you can see the disclaimer down the bottom that each loot box contains a combination of 4 cosmetic items. So those items that change your character's appearance or the appearance of things in the game. They offer no competitive advantage, and or you might receive some in-game credits. So it's a bit of a mixture. You don't know what you're going to get, but actually the worth inside there could be very variable, and that's where it can get tricky. Okay, moving on to question 5. Just give it a second just to make sure we have everyone. Okay, and off we go. Offering a special reward to convince a player to sign up to make regular payments with no easy way to cancel. Is that a subscription trap, a variable reward, or use of color and size? Well done, everyone got that right this time. Well done. So it is indeed a subscription trap. So it's using techniques to get someone into making a payment, and maybe they are unaware that they're going to be paying the same amount each month to continue to access those special features. So here is an example. Sometimes they might use free gifts or free rewards as a way of enticing people in at the start to make that initial payment. And many of them will have some kind of small print that may be on screen or may be hidden away in the terms and conditions somewhere. And in the case of this one, the eligibility says that actually once you pay this, you're entering into a recurring payment of $9.99 a month. And actually, you're only going to get the free gift after month 3. So you would need to pay 3 lots of $9.99 before you are eligible to receive the free gift that it suggests you would get right at the start. So it's quite misleading, this one, in terms of what you're actually receiving or what you're actually going into. And indeed, in that small print, it actually says see site for further information and to manage your subscription. So there's no easy opt out or easy cancel for the subscription. You have to actually go to the site for who makes the game and follow further instructions to cancel that subscription. And that can be part of a subscription trap too, is making it difficult to leave or putting barriers and extra steps in the way to prevent a customer from easily leaving as well. And last one, question 6. Okay, off we go. Good luck. Featuring brands or products in a game to persuade users to buy them, either digitally or to buy real-life products as well. Is that product placement, a nudge technique, or autoplay? Well done. It is indeed product placement. So it is advertising products through a game, either things that you buy in the game or real life products that you can buy, in the offline world, but trying to influence spending habits of the users, particularly children. And here is a really explicit and clear example of that. And that is actually in Fortnite, who have introduced a number of different features, particularly aimed at younger users in recent months. But one of those is actually introducing footwear that you can purchase for your particular character. And you can see here that all of this footwear is branded footwear. It very much mimics the footwear that you can buy in real life, premium footwear as well. And so you can see that it not only encourages children to maybe show an interest in purchasing these in-game digitally, but may influence their purchasing decisions in real life when it comes to trainers and footwear as well. So it's sometimes a tricky one for them to recognize that it may be changing their habits and their behaviors. Let's have a look at the leaderboard then. Let's see who won our quiz. It just takes a second to update. There we go. It was Clippy. So obviously I don't know who Clippy was. Well done, Clippy. You win our quiz. I'm afraid there is no prize for our quiz other than the glory and the prestige of being the fastest and the highest scorer. So well done. And thank you everyone for taking part. And although obviously this quiz is just part of the webinar, it's a great approach of something that you can do with your learners. It's really thinking about ways that you can kind of quiz them and test their knowledge of some of these features. And that may help you to identify gaps or areas of knowledge that you need to focus on to help them make them aware of these different features as well. So thanks very much for taking part in the quiz. I'm going to stop sharing and we're going to head back to the slides. So just bear with me a moment. Wonderful. Right, so we're back to the slides, and I'm just going to change tact a little bit now, just to help you sort of understand these features in a slightly different way. And you'll see a number of these features popping up as we go through a description. As part of the AdWiseOnline campaign, we produced a research report, really exploring digital manipulative marketing tactics, particularly those in games, to understand the nature of these features and the prevalence of them as well. And in the research report, it highlights four main types of these features. And all of those techniques that we've just talked about in the quiz fall under these different areas in one way or another. Some of them can even be found in multiple categories out of these four as well. So the first type is integration, and it's very much a case of trying to find a way of building advertising or product placement or promotion into the game in ways that are quite subtle, that encourage spending and encourage influencing purchasing decisions. So it can be placing adverts in the game in the style of the regular content, or sometimes within the theme of the content. So if it's a sports game, you'd likely see more adverts for sports products. So if it was a football game, you'd see more adverts for football related things, be they football boots, buying replica shirts, footballs, all that kind of stuff. And you can see from the first screenshot on the screen there with the racing car, sometimes it's a way of finding ways of embedding that advertising into the game world. So if you're driving around the streets in a city, you're going to expect to see advertising billboards because that's what many cities have. And an in-game virtual city will have advertising billboards, but they may be displaying actual adverts for real products and services you can buy in the offline world. And sometimes for children, that kind of blurs the line and the boundaries between what is stuff that's featured in the game and what is something that's actually being marketed or advertised towards me. And the example of the footwear in Fortnite that we just looked at in the quiz is a good example of that one. It's trying to blur those boundaries around, well, what is just a feature of the game that I might be able to buy, and what is actually something that's trying to market a product towards me. So that's called integration. The second is interaction, and that's where you can actually use players in the game to actively increase the reach and the impact of a marketing campaign that the game is trying to run. And again, that could be for features and products that you buy within the game that are digital. It could indeed be for product promotion for things that exist outside of the game as well. And it very much leverages this idea of player interaction and gaming culture. So you can see by the first screenshot at the top, it might be players talking to each other about good deals in the game or discount codes they might be able to use or how they found some purchases better value than others. And that kind of persuasive power from peers can be very, very influential, particularly to children. If one of their friends is saying, yes, I bought this, this was a great pack, it really helped me in the game, that might persuade another child to want to buy that as well. And gaming culture exists outside of games themselves. There's a huge culture on platforms like Discord who are discussing games, on other social media platforms as well, but particularly video sharing sites like TikTok and YouTube, where there are influencers and popular figures who are talking about games, doing playthroughs of games, especially on live services like Twitch and Kick, where they're playing games live on air and the audience can chat to them and follow along. All of those kind of things can influence children, and particularly if those influencers are then promoting a product, either as part of the game or outside of the game, then that can have a profound impact on spending behaviors too. And so, yeah, players act as multipliers and influencers within this. They kind of exist within the marketing model. And because they're within that advertising and marketing model, they find it quite difficult to spot and they don't always recognize their role within that and how they're actually amplifying the ability of that marketing campaign to reach more players and make more money. The third one is personalization, and that's where using data that's collected and harvested around players in the game is used to profile them. So using demographic data, using data about how they play the game and how often and on what days and when they log in and when they log out, all of those things can be tailored to change the kind of advertising that they see, or indeed the kind of in-game offers that are offered to them. So if a game knows that a player is really close to leveling up in the game, it may start showing them adverts for a boost that can get them over that line and level them up quicker. Whereas if they're really far away from the next level, it's going to show them different types of adverts to incentivize. So it very much plays into this idea of targeting the advertising and the offers down to something that meets the potential needs of the players, and that's all been identified through their usage data and data about them as well. And again, that's another example where subscription traps come in, maybe offering subscriptions at certain points, like when a new player first starts playing or when they reach a particular milestone in the game. All of those can be very persuasive as well. And many young people, based on the research report that we did for the AdWiseOnline campaign, looking at various studies around this, many young people are unaware that their data is being collected and used in this way, particularly data about how they use and play the games. What was also interesting that the report found was that for older teens, if you start to profile too much and this advertising becomes too personalized and too intrusive, they actually do recognize it quite quickly, and they put kind of backlash on it, and they will push back against it, and they may actually exit games or services that try to market directly to them personally too strongly. So there's kind of a fine line that companies tread on this. Too much can turn customers away, particularly young customers. Too little obviously allows them to miss out on opportunities. But they are using data all the time to change that, and that can be, again, very persuasive to younger players. And then finally, it's the use of emotion, because at the end of the day, all players are human beings, they feel emotions, and there are design features that can manipulate and change the emotions that we feel as part of our gaming experience. There are positive emotions, so of course there may be ways to kind of encourage people to do things by offering rewards or incentives, or trying to build a positive brand attitude towards the game or towards things advertised within the game. But of course, then there are the more negative features that we kind of explored in the quiz as well, trying to create a sense of urgency or fear of missing out, or trying to nudge people to make certain choices over another choice, kind of taking away their ability to make a well-informed decision. And what the research report also found was that, particularly for young people and children, their ability to critically think and evaluate around this, that advertising literacy, can be impacted by emotional content. Content that's producing strong emotions like shock or surprise or confusion or worry or anger kind of then gets in the way of them being able to apply that critical thinking to make well-informed purchasing decisions. And that can change their behaviors too. So those are the four types, and if you want to read more about it, there's loads and loads of detail in the research report itself. The web address for that's a little bit tricky, although it's found in the main AdWise online materials, but I've just put a short web address there to help you get to the PDF very quickly. And it's well worth having a little read through so you understand some of these features and some of the challenges around this in more detail. But why do companies use these tactics? Well, the research report does indeed go into more detail on that too, but there tend to be a number of key things that drive the motivation for companies to employ these tactics in their games. The fact that obviously they're trying to earn money through advertising and through offering in-app purchases means that actually by offering a product for free, you are lowering the bar of entry to players joining your game. If players have to pay 60, 70 euros to buy your game and then have to spend more money in that game, you're setting the bar of entry quite high. But if you make it free, like many mobile and online games are, then actually you're making it very easy for anyone to join in and get into the game, to start to become invested, and then want to make additional purchases of in-game items and features in the future. And it's also about engagement. By making that bar really low and allowing people to get in and play a few hours and get a feel for the game and get into it and like it, then they're going to spend more time in that game. More time spent gives more opportunities for data collection, and more time spent within the game presents more opportunities for showing advertising as well. And there's also this whole idea of time and money investment, because once children have invested a certain amount of time into a game, they may not want to quit that game. They've got to level 65 out of 100. They've invested that time. They've made some achievements. They don't want to just throw that all away. So they're going to continue playing because they want to keep progressing up those levels. If they've already made an in-game purchase, either of some money, like in-game currency, or a new feature, or some new characters, then they've invested money into that account, gaming account, and it now means something. And again, they may be reticent to kind of move away from that to another game. And there's a bit of a tipping point there as well. Once you've made one purchase within the game, that sometimes breaks the barrier and makes it much easier and more likely for you to make an additional purchase in the game in the future. And companies are aware of this and will again adjust their advertising to try and encourage that approach as well. They know you've bought something once. What can they get you to do to buy something again in the future? And then all of these things can have different impacts on different children. Now, your learners, depending on their age and their sort of state of development, are going to vary dramatically. And of course, the games that they play, even just in a class of children all the same age, could vary dramatically as well. So it's important to understand that not all young people and children are affected in the same way by these manipulative marketing tactics. Some are affected more than others and in different areas, such as the ones that you see on the screen here. There are, of course, with anything involving money, risks to financial well-being, because if children are being persuaded to spend all their pocket money or their allowance and they have no money left, then that can cause problems. That can cause anxiety. That can cause conflict within families as well. If their parents or caregivers find out that they've spent all their money on in-game purchases rather than saving it for other things. In cases where children are able to access the financial details of parents or caregivers, such as a PayPal account that belongs to a parent, or a credit card or a bank account, if they're using those payment methods to make purchases in a game, that can cause issues as well, particularly if they end up spending excessively and spending a lot of money in a game to buy lots of things using their parents' or caregivers' money. And you can see obviously how that would lead to issues in a family too. There are risks to physical health because many of these manipulative practices are designed to get you to stay engaged within a game or an app or a service for longer. And if you're using it for longer, then you're spending more time on technology or invested in that for longer. And that can have an impact on physical health. Evidence is mixed and definitely doesn't establish a cause and effect, but there is evidence out there that suggests that prolonged use of technology can have an impact on eyesight. It can have an impact on things like headaches. It can have an impact on body posture as well, particularly around the neck. There is evidence around technology affecting sleep in different ways. And again, these persuasive features, if they lead to someone playing games for a long time late at night, could have an impact on sleep as well. The evidence is even more confusing when it comes to mental health and well-being. Again, there are no clear cause and effects, but it is important to understand that prolonged or excessive use of technology can lead to anxiety. For some, it has led to depression, and particularly where it involves money, if it has been a case of becoming addicted or having problematic use of these services and spending lots of money or spending lots of time, then of course all of those may have impacts on mental health as well. As I mentioned, though, all children are different, so it affects children in different ways. Of course, because of the way that data is collected, there are risks to privacy. If a child becomes used to sharing a lot of personal data in the game with the gaming service, that may lower their boundaries and their barriers to sharing personal data with others, say other players in the game, and that can have an impact on safety as well as privacy. But also, children may not always be aware of what personal data is being collected about them in a game, if it's hidden away in terms and conditions, or if it's not explicitly said to them. And then finally, risks to safety kind of sit around all of this. It's kind of all these things wrapped together. As I mentioned, there's risks around interacting with people you don't know in these games and sharing personal data that may be of value to them. And that can have an impact on your account security, but also impact on ways that they can communicate and contact you as well. So a whole mixture of things that can all come out of these potential manipulative practices. And I'm just going to spend a few minutes just going through some useful things to be aware of. These aren't necessarily things that you need to teach your learners verbatim so that they know every single article related to GDPR or the Digital Services Act, but it is useful for you as a professional or an educator to have a working understanding of this, to recognise that children have rights, of course, offline. Those rights apply online as well, but there are, when it comes to specific child online safety and protection, and children as young consumers, there are specific rights that fall under a number of pieces of legislation EU-wide. So it's well worth just being aware of these things, and you'll see links on these slides to where you can go and read the full documentation of the legislation if you so wish. So I'll just whiz through these fairly quickly. So in GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation that's been around for quite some time now, since 2018, Recital 38 says that companies have to give specific protection and consideration to collecting and processing children's data. Children's data is more precious, if you like, than just adult data. It has to be treated slightly differently. Article 8 says that, in fact, for services that collect children's data and are directly offered to children, parental consent must be obtained on those services. Now, that's for anyone under the age of 16. There's parental consent required to collect their data, but each EU member state is able to choose a different age of consent in relation to this. So some countries have opted to go as young as 13, others have gone 14, 15, or 16. And that's for services that are used and directly offered to children. Article 12, it talks about the fact that all of this information provided must be transparent and accessible in a form that children can understand. And that's where Recital 58 clarifies that. It needs to be in clear and plain language that is appropriate for the age of young people using that service. They should be able to read it and understand it. If it's terms and conditions written at a high school grade reading or a graduate level of reading, then that is not appropriate if children are supposed to be able to understand and follow those terms and conditions as well. When it comes to the Digital Services Act, number of recitals and articles you can see on screen here, and a couple of them apply in different ways, so they appear more than once. Recital 81 is about whether or not young people will understand how this service works. Is it clearly explained to them the functioning of this, including marketing and advertising practices that exist within that service? Recital 81 and indeed also 83 talk about the fact that actually companies need to give due consideration to how their design features could lead to problematic use or addiction. If they are encouraging people to spend all their time on that game, then they need to seriously consider whether or not they are actually encouraging addictive behaviors. Recital 67 talks about what we term dark patterns. So these patterns or these design features and techniques that manipulate or persuade purchasing power or behaviors towards purchasing. And those are actually prohibited if they are persuading purchasing, or if they are trying to make it difficult for someone to leave a subscription service. And then you can see Article 28 appears twice here at the end. It's important to put in appropriate measures for a high level of privacy, safety, and security for younger users, and also the fact that it is prohibited to use minors' data and the profiling of them to show targeted advertising. So yes, children and young people will still see adverts in online games and online platforms, but those services are not allowed to use children's data to target that advertising towards specific things and products that they know may be of interest to that child based on their profile data. Continuing on with a few extra ones, Article 14 says that actually that companies need to be making an extra effort to explain to minors what they are agreeing to. So it feeds back into GDPR in terms of language being clear and understandable in terms and conditions and other things that children may have to consent to. And Article 34 covers what we call very large online platforms, or VLOPs, and very large online search engines. And those biggest ones in Europe have to make sure that they are carrying out risk assessments regularly on the risks that their services present to children, including physical and mental well-being, but also the impact of things such as advertising systems and the use of algorithms on their services as well. And algorithms are used in games. They may be used in things like loot boxes to calculate the chances of someone receiving an item, and in some of the in-game mechanics that may encourage longer playtime, and indeed in some cases spending as well. And then in Article 35, it's really important that those companies, once they've established and assessed those risks, that they put in appropriate measures to limit those risks to young people. And that could be adaptation or changes to their terms and conditions. It could be testing and adapting their algorithm and advertising services to make sure that they are not encouraging those other behaviors that are prohibited and already are highlighted in the DSA. And you can see the final point there, really, really important. The rights of the child must be protected in all cases as well. That's quite complicated, obviously, and you may or may not be familiar with the Digital Services Act already, but there is a really useful guide that is available via the link on screen, and Ina has popped it into the chat as well, that is available in 24 languages and is a user-friendly guide that is suitable for you to possibly share with your learners. Particularly older learners should be able to work through that and understand that fairly well, but also a useful one that you can share with families to talk about with their children too. Just moving on to a couple of additional ones that are just useful to mention. I'm not going to go into great detail because it's kind of all woven together in these two. But there's also two directives, the Unfair Consumer Practices Directive and the Audiovisual and Media Services Directive, that also have various articles and recitals that relate to advertising practices, not just within games, but across a wide variety of different online platforms and services. And particularly with audio, visual, and media, that also relates to things like video on demand, video sharing platforms, and other sort of TV services that are offered online. So I'll just highlight these points quickly. In the UCPD, it's really important to recognise that it is prohibited to have unclear or misleading advertising or marketing tactics. So it needs to be clear to children and users as well that they are actually being marketed to or advertised to. So hiding those adverts in the game world, as we saw with the integration, is something that is not a good idea, because it's making it very difficult for children to understand what is marketing and advertising, what is a feature within the game. Some of those approaches can also be considered to be undue influence or particularly aggressive, particularly if you're trying to nudge children into spending or making certain purchasing decisions. So those things are prohibited as well. And specifically, children are considered to be a vulnerable consumer group under this directive, and therefore, need to be treated differently to other consumer groups. And under the AVMSD, useful to know that personal data for profiling and targeted advertising is prohibited, and that feeds back into things that you saw in the Digital Services Act. But also important for companies to know that actually if they're collecting data about a child for one purpose, say for example to establish what age they are in order to provide safety features within that game or service to make it safer, because you've collected that data about their age, you are prohibited from using the same data for a different incompatible purpose, like, for example, showing adverts for products that may be suitable or desirable for that particular age. So if you know that a child is 14, you can't then use that data to try and target advertising to things that 14-year-olds may want to buy. There's also the Consumer Rights Directive, which applies to every EU citizen, and you can find out more about that via the ECC website, including things like online consumer rights, and that includes not just buying digital purchases, but also real products that you buy on websites like Amazon and eBay, in terms of what your rights are as a consumer, and the rights of children as consumers as well. And that covers things like cooling off periods and guarantees and warranties and returns and things like that. So well worth exploring that too, just so you're familiar. And you can also find details of your national centre who you can contact if you feel that any consumer rights have been violated, either yours as an individual or indeed any of your learners as well. So it's really important to help our learners to spot these risks. And these are all great questions and steps that you can take with them in the classroom if you're talking about these topics and you're talking about the games or indeed the apps that they love to play and use. Getting them to really think about these questions that they can ask themselves while they're playing are really useful ways to help them spot some of these manipulative tactics. So things like getting them to ask, is it too good to be true? If it sounds like a really amazing offer, say a game is suddenly offering a 90% discount on something when it wasn't before, is that a genuine offer? Was it just way too highly priced to start with, and that's why they can knock 90% off? Are you actually getting what you think you're getting when you pay your money? Or is it something that maybe is a bit misleading? And alongside that, particularly, many games try to obscure the real cost of items by getting you to buy in-game currency. So you have to spend 20 euros and you get 1,000 gems. And then everything you buy in the game is in gems rather than euros. And then you might buy something for 200 gems, something here for 500 gems, and it becomes much, much harder to then know how much that costs in real money. What is the comparison, the conversion back to euros? So encouraging children to do that and actually judge that before they make a purchase. Say it's 1,000 gems. How much is that in euros? Is that a good deal? Do you think that's too expensive for what it is? They may still want to make that purchase regardless, but it helps them to become more well-informed consumers if they're constantly converting back to real money and real currency in their country to get a judge for how expensive things are in that game or service. Thinking about urgency and FOMO as well, really getting to kind of push back on that and look out for that. Is something trying to make you hurry into a purchase? Is it saying that it's a one-time only thing, or you've only got 2 hours left to buy before it goes forever? The reality with digital products, particularly in-game features and items, is that the developer has the ability to bring back that item to the store whenever they like. They've still got the game code, that item hasn't gone, but sometimes they will really restrict those purchases to try and increase the rarity or the scarcity, and that can encourage people to make a purchase now because they don't know if it's ever going to be back in the store in the future. And just to give an example, Fortnite is a great example of that, where if you were a player at Fortnite when it first began, way back in the day, there were things you could buy in the store then that have only recently come back to the store years later because they recognized that it was held to be more rare or more valuable for players that had that item to not bring it back to the store for everyone else to buy. It changed the dynamics and the value of some of those items. So all of those kind of things are important too. And then you can see these other questions here. Do you trust this? You know, if an influencer is saying you need to buy this thing in the game right now, are they getting commission? Are they promoting a product and haven't made it clear? Why is someone trying to get you to buy this thing? What do other people think? Asking other players in the game what they've purchased and what's useful and good value, looking at reviews, looking at comments in app stores and in games as well, and in-game chat servers on Discord and other places are all great ways of getting clues about what might be good or bad value for money. And then really importantly, encourage them to look for any small print before they press that buy button and they spend their money. What are they actually agreeing to? Is it a subscription trap that they weren't aware of and they're actually going to enter into a recurring subscription? So, we've got a couple of moments and a few extra slides to cover as well. But it'd be really great to hear any tips that you have that you may already use with your learners, or any tips that you can think of for what learners can do when they're playing their favorite games, what kind of things they should look out for or think about to help them spot some of these manipulative digital marketing practices. So you can see on the screen here, excuse me, I've got a Padlet set up. Again, if you're using a separate device, you can scan the QR code to go straight to the Padlet, or you can follow the link that's just been popped into the chat as well. And what we'll do is we'll just take a couple of moments just to switch over to the Padlet and see some of your suggestions coming in. That Padlet will be open after today's webinar session, so please do feel free to add to it with any further things that you may think of after today. It could be in a week's time. It will still be there for you to contribute, and you can see what other people have said as well. So I'm going to switch over very quickly to the Padlet. The details for joining it are in the chat as well, and we'll see some of your top tips in just a moment. Wonderful. So hopefully you can now see my Padlet screen, which would probably look very similar to the way it looks on your device as well. And I can see that a few people are already typing in to make a post. If you're not sure, you've never used Padlet before, on most devices, you're just looking for the plus down at the bottom here, and you can click on that. And it will basically give you a sticky note that you can type a response to, and then they will appear on the Padlet as people finish them. Okay, so we'll just give a few more moments, and then we will have to go back to the slides because I want to make sure that we keep this webinar on time. But as I mentioned, this Padlet is available for you to access at any time. So if you do suddenly have a moment of inspiration and a great top tip that you would like to share, then please do pop it into the Padlet. So we've got one in there already. Thank you so much. Think twice before you click on any ad. Really great advice. I was actually working with some children yesterday as part of an early event for Safer Internet Day, and we were talking about adverts that they see in games that are offering the chance to make money by playing games. And there's a real sort of fad of those at the moment. So within lots of free games that children might play, the in-game advertising, so the adverts that pop up every 5 minutes, 10 minutes, or when you want to refill your lives, the adverts themselves are specifically trying to advertise other apps that promise free money, which, as we know, sounds like a wonderful idea, but the reality is that there's strings attached there. Usually in regards to your personal data. So it's a common one for children. So definitely thinking carefully about it. It can be very tempting to want to get free money, but actually, what are you paying for in terms of cost with regards to your data as well? Great advice there. So definitely, if you're not sure about something, asking a trusted adult for some help and support. And that's a good example because actually many of the manipulative tactics that they will see in games are going to occur when they're actually at home or with their families or using devices outside of school rather than when they are with you as educators. So making sure they know who they can turn to if they're not sure about something and have that discussion and get some help is really, really important. Thanks for that one. And absolutely, really, really important thing. If it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. And sometimes gut instinct really works on this. If you just have that instinctual feeling that something is not quite right, it's usually the case that you are correct. There's something off or amiss or not quite right on that. So getting children sometimes to think about that feeling that they have about something can be really useful as well. Many thanks for those top tips. If you think of any more, please do feel free to pop them into the Padlet. Let's just go back to the slides, and we've just got a few more things to cover before we finish. So hopefully you can now see the slides again. We'll just move on to some additional things. So there's some really useful things out there already that are not only part of the AdWiseOnline campaign, but other materials that can help you to support your learners to understand these issues and indeed to exercise their rights online as consumers and indeed as children. So it's all about talking about these issues as well. So if you know that your children love playing your learners love playing a particular game online, talk to them about it. What kind of adverts do they see? What kind of things can you buy in the game? Having that discussion so that you can become more familiar with the things they love to play gives you the opportunity to then talk about those features that might exist that may be changing and manipulating their spending habits within that game. And it helps them become more aware of those issues as well. Because if you highlight those things or bring that to their attention, they're more likely to spot and think about those things the next time they're playing that game by themselves. It's also important to have regular conversations about personal data. What's okay to share online? What's not okay? And how does it change depending on who you're sharing it with? If you're sharing certain personal details and personal data with a company to set up an account, that's one thing. But if you're then sharing your password or your date of birth or how to contact you with another player in the game, that means something different in terms of safety. And actually, just because a company asks for data about you doesn't necessarily mean that you have to give them that data as well. Some companies will try and collect as much data as they can to profile their users and their players, but actually they don't have a right to that and they don't need all of that data. So encouraging children to think critically about that is key as well. As we mentioned, telling a trusted adult is really important, but you are a trusted adult as well when those young people are with you. So remind them that you can help them if they've got concerns or worries about things they experience online, and do make them aware of obviously the different support routes and services and help that's available in your school or your setting to support them if they have concerns about their safety or well-being online as well. And then last thing on this slide, the Educational Toolkit for Young Consumers made by the ECC is a really fantastic resource that you can explore. It has a YouTube video, which the you can see the thing that says playing for free here is a screenshot of that. And that's a video that you can show to learners and then stop at various points to have an ongoing discussion about it. There is a supporting teacher's guide to help you do so. And you can see from the other screenshots here, there are some really great quizzes that you can print off and fold into mini quiz cards and get your learners to actually ask each other questions about their consumer rights. And that includes on things like subscription traps and services, on rights around purchases in mobile games, and wider digital consumer rights in online shopping as well. So there's a number of different quizzes that you can use there. It's a multiple choice quiz for each question, and the answers are actually included in the materials. And again, there are further guides for teachers around that too. So a really good one to do to make it quite practical and hands-on in the classroom. And it's also about what you can do to teach them about the more technical aspects of this. So how can they look for and find settings that allow them to manage their privacy, to turn off notifications that might be trying to encourage them to come back to a game or spend money in a game, how they can find options to opt out of certain marketing practices in a game or an app, and what steps they can take to actually remove their account and their data if they wish to as well. It's also, particularly for younger ones as well, a chance to talk about money management. So talking about how budgeting works, how you need to sometimes impose limits on your own spending, how you need to save money so that you have enough money for all the things that you want now and in the future as well. So good financial skills are also a key part of this too. It's also about helping them get to grips with terms and conditions. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean sitting in a classroom together and reading all the terms and conditions for their favourite games, but it is important to help them recognise that those terms and conditions should be written in a way they can understand and do detail how their personal data is collected. So helping them get to grips with that a little bit and recognise that just because the game hasn't said it in the game doesn't mean it isn't written in the terms and conditions and is still happening. And that might include certain types of data collection too. And then, of course, there are sometimes reasons to step away from a game and try and find a suitable alternative, particularly a game that's being very pushy about trying to spend money or try to show you lots of adverts all the time. And as you heard from the research report earlier, actually, when it is something that's pushing really hard, doing a really hard sale on a child, sometimes they will actually back away. They get frustrated by that and they want to find something different. So there's a great website called darkpattern.games, and it's a free website where someone's put together lists of games that use different types of manipulative techniques to persuade spending or persuade sharing of personal data. So it calls out the worst offenders, if you like, but it also has a list of games that don't contain any of these manipulative patterns as well. So a list of games that children may prefer to play too, across a wide variety of genres. And then, of course, we also have our AdWiseOnline guide that's been created for children and young people that helps them to understand all the things we've been talking about in this webinar and more in terms of top tips and where they can go to for help. And the link for that you can see is on this slide, and I'm sure it will, and is already in the chat. So there you go, you've got it too. Do be aware, if you have any concerns, or indeed any of your learners have any concerns that their rights have been violated online, or they have any concerns about their safety or well-being online, then you can reach out to your Safer Internet Centre in your country. And a full list of the details of all the centres can be found on the Better Internet for Kids platform. Each centre has a helpline that can be contacted, and they can offer further advice and support. And depending on the nature of the query, they can sometimes pass you on to other organisations who may provide further advice and support as well. And the AdWiseOnline campaign itself, if you haven't already explored it and have a look, please do go and have a look. It is on the Better Internet for Kids site. The address is on screen, and it includes lots of really useful stuff, not just for your own knowledge, but knowledge that you can share with parents and caregivers, but also your learners too. Particularly some of the key terms and the language used around manipulative digital marketing tactics. So if you don't know, or you're still not quite sure what a loot box is, or what a battle pass is, or how FOMO works in games, then there's some great content on there to help you understand. All of the things that we've covered in this webinar are also included in a free self-directed training module. So it's very similar to the deep dive modules that we saw at the start in the Teacher and Educator Corner. And it goes through everything that I've talked about in this webinar to help you refresh and reaffirm your knowledge and understanding in this area. We've also got podcasts and lots of links to other useful resources from across the InSave network of Safer Internet Centres that you might find useful in your teaching and to aid your understanding of this topic as well. And then two final things, very, very important. The first one is our massive open online course, or MOOC, that started this week on the European SchoolNet Academy platform. It's titled Child Online Safety, What Educators Need to Know. It's running for 5.5 weeks from the start of this week all the way through to the 12th of March. It roughly requires about 3 hours per week of time investment, and there are 4 modules that you work your way through. Each module gets unlocked a week after the next one. So module 1 is live as we speak. Next week, module 2 goes live, then module 3, then module 4. And module 4 of this course is actually about everything we've talked about in this webinar. So it can give you further knowledge and understanding around manipulative marketing practices. Module 3 of the course is very much focused on persuasive design features that are used on social media platforms and apps, which complements many of the things we've talked about today too. So there's lots and lots of content in the course that can help you understand these issues in more detail. And just like all the other courses available on the European SchoolNet Academy platform, completely free to enroll and work your way through. If you can't take part during the live dates of the course, which are the dates on screen, don't worry, you can enroll on the course anytime after the end date and still access all of the materials for free. The only thing you can't receive is the completion certificate at the end. But this course will be available now and any time in the future as well. So please do consider enrolling. And then one final thing, as part of our work on the Better Internet for Kids program and campaign, we are running evaluation sessions with teachers and educators to try and learn more about your thoughts and views and opinions about child online safety, particularly in regards to the Better Internet for Kids Plus strategy that's working to improve child online safety and has been for the last 2 years. So if you'd like to take part and give your thoughts, we would love to hear from you. You can express an interest by following the link that's on screen or scanning the QR code. And I've also put on screen there the upcoming dates for the online group sessions. They are 90 minutes in length each. And you can see we've got a few dates in February that are available. So if you are able to join us and you haven't already taken part in one of these sessions, we'd love you to take part and express your thoughts and ideas and experiences too. And anyone who takes part in this is able to receive a participation certificate as well. So hopefully you can join us for those. And that brings us to the end. Thank you so much for sticking with me for the whole webinar. Lots and lots of information there, but hopefully lots of useful links that you may wish to explore moving forward to help you understand this area. If you do want to get in contact about anything, then please do feel free to use the link that's on screen to get in touch with us as well. But thank you so much for your time and attention this evening. I hope you found it useful, and I wish you a very pleasant evening. Thank you so much.